Tanner Berquist, my wonderful roommate and friend and men's coach. And we jam in the house a lot on conscious relationships, what it takes to shift and be in good relationship. We've bumped into our fair share of masculine feminine dynamics with our living together. And so we wanted to share with you guys today a little bit around the concept of toxic masculinity, what that means in a time frame post Me Too, and how do we come into relationship, into conscious relating in a good way and a healthy way together. So welcome, Tanner.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's lovely to be in my own home.
Yeah, we're here today.
What an interesting environment we live in. You know, I tune into Facebook, and I'm sure lots of other people do, when they see these posts about the new feminism coming out and these beautiful transitions for the non-binary folks, LGBTQ, and a lot of hyper-awareness on, I'd say, toxic masculinity in terms of sexual expression, and that coming towards women and, men and non-binary folks in that way. And I think that what sparked this and what sparked my journey towards men's coaching is recognizing that it's one thing to talk about these things on Facebook or on YouTube, and that's very helpful, and these types of live streamings and videos are one piece of how we can shift the awareness. But I found in myself and in my heart, my responsibility was to be a different kind of man. Mm-hmm. And I can say that when the Me Too movement came out, I didn't understand what it was at first, and I put up a hashtag because I thought I understood what they were talking about, not realizing that it was focused primarily on bringing awareness to the struggle and plight of women in today's world. And shortly following that, as some of you may be aware, there was another hashtag called Never Again, I think is what it was, which was essentially for those who have been perpetrators in the past of inappropriate sexual behavior to take responsibility and recognize their faults and their wrongdoings. And it was actually that piece that really hit home for me, because my own journey, as I've shared with you numerous times, has come through absolute metamorphosis when it comes to relating to myself and relating to others in terms of...
Tanner used to be a bro star.
I used to be a bro star. Thanks, Elena, for letting the internet know. Tried to delete all proof of that, but that's all right. But recognizing that how I was behaving towards women and my fellow men was utterly inappropriate. And started to ask myself, why? Like, where do these things come from? Why am I behaving this way? Why are other people behaving this way? Hi, Crystal.
Hey, Crystal.
And it really stemmed from toxic masculinity in a macro sense when it comes to our society, and what we're seeing through video games, what we're seeing through TV, what we're seeing through the media, things like HBO and these really popular media forms are informing us of what is appropriate for a man to do and behave, let alone the POTUS, President of the United States. We don't need to mention his name here.
Nope.
That is the epitome of an acceptance of toxic masculinity. So instead of trying to change the system on a large scale, I feel and I know it to be more advantageous for men like myself and others like you and women supporting to really be the embodiment of a positive shift in that. So here's my little diatribe.
Yeah, thank you. I just came across the term toxic masculinity in the last maybe year or so. I'd never heard it before. I definitely experienced it, and once I was given a frame of reference, I was like, oh yeah, that and that and that. And for me, I've had, because of some of the travels that I've done, I've experienced what that looks like and how men and women relate in terms of the sexual polarity, in terms of the experience of that across many different cultures. And I remember a moment that was really potent for me was the experience of landing in Morocco. And experiencing that like Muslim African culture and being like, whoa, like actually I'm so free to be myself from a cultural standpoint in North America. And feeling that like there was this feeling of being like a sheep in a pen of wolves. right? There was this, again, it was visceral, and it was like kind of terrifying to walk in the streets. And so that's sort of, if I can use that as one really extreme example of what that can feel like. And then it began to occur to me that people actually walked around in our North American culture feeling like that all the time, feeling like life was dangerous and men were dangerous. And then when Tanner and I started talking about it more, there was this realization that that actually has an impact on men too. I was totally oblivious to that as a concept. I knew what it felt like as a woman to feel like I was, being attacked with eyes, or being like vultured on, or preyed upon with that sort of sexual energy experience. But I didn't realize what it did to men to be shamed for that. And a really beautiful example that I love was just after Morocco, I went to Spain, and we were downtown in some, catchy, like a 17th Avenue, like fancy place where people were hanging out at the bars. And we just met a lady on the beach. She was really cool. She brought us around and was showing us around these cool spaces. Hi, Gary, long time. And she was just standing there, and this guy came up to her in the street, and he was like, in Spanish, but like was just like, "Oh, darling, like, can I just say something to you?" And she was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I just need you to know that your thighs are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Mwah, mwah, so gorgeous." And she was like, "Oh, thank you." And she just took it, and she appreciated it, and she felt really good in it. And there was no slime in it. There was no ugh in it. And in that moment, I was like, "Oh, that's what we're aiming for in terms of appreciation and receptivity by strangers in public, in terms of that sexual energy," right? And then he went on his way. Maybe he sat and had a beer with us for a bit, but then he moved, right? And it wasn't clingy, it wasn't grabbing, it was just this appreciation of beauty, like, "Oh my God, look at the flowers are blooming," right? "I see beauty and I must appreciate it," right? And that was such a clarifying moment for me, because it was probably the first time in my life that I'd really actually had a clear, oh, this is it. This is an example of what that can look like when it's healthy. And it was an extreme contrast, because I'd just come from feeling uncomfortable if my lower neck was showing, right? Or my wrists were showing, or my ankles were showing. So it was a really huge contrast, and showed that whole spectrum. And when I saw that guy give the compliment in Spain, it was like, oh, this is what men can be like when they're not hampered by shame. It's not like, "You're hot," right? And then running away. So it's not this terror in how is this going to be received. It was just a simple appreciation of beauty and back and forth, and that for me held oh, this is what we want to aim for.
Yeah, I think there's some really important points that you touched on there. I'll work in reverse.
Yeah.
When that being an example of when men aren't hampered by shame, I think that's a really good piece. And I think there's another side of that, which is when men are actually approaching with a recognition of the innate humanity in another. Mm-hmm. And I know that on this, maybe some of the darker sides of the internet, there's a lot of backlash in men's communities about well, what are we supposed to do now? Everything that I do is going to be perceived as harassment. Approaching a woman on the streets asking for a phone number, that's harassment. Complimenting a woman, well, that's harassment. And you've got this fear, and I'm by no means am I saying that this is the true stance of all women, but this is a lot of the concern that's coming up in some communities of men. And I think that the fear is not only of shame, but it's also, I saw this on the internet yesterday, and I thought it was a very, very, I want to say, raw and potent example comparison. So there's a lot of sex shaming when it comes to the feminine sexuality in today's society. Yeah, that's a whole other topic for another video.
Yeah.
But someone was saying the weight that women carry when it comes to conducting themselves in society is to not being seen as that negative slut or whore, whatever terrible word you want to use, is, and this is conjecture potentially, but equivalent to the weight that men carry is to not be seen as creeps.
Yeah.
And to be able to have that appreciation. There's numerous times where I see people, both men and women, where I'm not sure what the proper mode of conduct is if I want to share an appreciation of their beauty or their intelligence or something like this because of the social context, because we're not given or not shown and have not learned, I think, as a society yet what that looks like. Maybe in some more socially liberal places, like places in Europe where that is more ingrained through hundreds of years of history, then you can just say, you know, Bella, my God.
You're beautiful.
You've changed my world just by being here. Have a beautiful day and moving on.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Holding space for that within our culture and our society. For
It's
sure.
huge.
Yeah,
it's huge. I think it would be really advantageous too to maybe talk about some of the characteristics of toxic masculinity from your perspective as a woman and also my perspective as a man as it relates to women and as it relates man to man.
Yeah. So the experience of toxic masculinity as a woman, there's sort of two pieces. So one is like personal experience and the other is like how I see sisters treated. So personal experience would be like choosing not to walk at night on my own. If I do, like being on hypervigilance. And I've experienced, a moment where I was absolutely terrified and chased by somebody at some point in my life, and I saw how that impacted my nervous system and how it took me 5 or 6 months of like having a partner with me walking in those kind of situations to be able to calm down enough to feel confident walking on my own again. And that wasn't even it wasn't a rape. It was just like fight or flight, super extensive. So recognizing that women are walking around with unprocessed trauma, a lot of them, and feeling really unsafe in their bodies. It comes into like, I can't talk to a man without him without him thinking that I'm trying to come on to him, even if he's just a friend. Like even you and I bumped into that. I was like, I like and respect you. That must mean I'm attracted to you. I'm so confused, right? And we had to have a conversation about that to be like, oh, we can be friends. And like, and that's beautiful. Like it was a foreign concept to me.
That is to platonically relate to a man.
To platonically relate to a man, yeah. And then I don't know what else. I know that there's when it comes to like, there's a sense of like needing to protect other women from men sometimes, of like I've stopped my car driving and like checked in to see how somebody was doing because they were walking or talking with somebody, and I was just driving by and I was like, I don't think that's okay, like she might get dragged into a car type thing. And they were having an argument, but it wasn't maybe as dangerous as I thought it might be. But there's this like needing to protect this, okay, they're talking, but like the vibe doesn't feel quite right, so like what's going on, and just sort of watching or seeing women in my life go into relationships or into dynamics and I'm like, ooh, like that's not the best piece. But then because of the cultural layering of like of shame and of oppression around sexuality in general, there's this piece of, oh, but it's not my place to say something, or it's not my place to do something, or it's not my place to step in. So that's challenging. I just wanted to say hi to Andrea and Tarzi. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for everybody else who's on here live. I can't necessarily see. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about toxic masculinity, Me Too, and conscious relating. Super grateful that you're here. And this is my wonderful friend and roommate, Tanner Berquist.
Hello.
So, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so all of those things from the feminine perspective, and then, that realization that there's actually something from the masculine perspective. Yeah. That's a whole, like, oh, men are impacted by this too? Absolutely. What a strange concept.
Yeah, so, thank you
for
sharing your experience. I know that it can be very hard to rehash those types of fearful experiences. Holy crap. So, that is a big one. Yeah, I think two pieces I want to introduce. One is what toxic masculinity looks like between men, but also how the current atmosphere affects men, which is a big piece. In reading some forums, there are men, and I've had this experience myself, where we're walking at night, and it's not that we're fearful like women are fearful, but there's always an awareness that I could very well be making a woman feel fearful right now by my very presence.
I had no idea that
Absolutely.
was an actual experience.
Absolutely. Well, and in knowing that,
Wow.
like, I'm above 6 feet tall. I'm not a small dude. I've got a beard. If I'm wearing a hoodie and they can't see my face, no one knows. No one knows that I would love to hug and I hope you have a good day. Like, I'm not a violent human being by any standpoint. But they don't know that, and they're just going to judge based on the face. And if they can't see my eyes and they can't hear my voice and they don't know me, there is a completely justified grounds for feeling fearful based on the climate.
Right. And if you were to say, "Hey,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
not a
safe," like that doesn't help.
No.
That doesn't make you, if anything, it's like, ah! Right? He's talking. Why is he talking?
Yeah. Why is he talking to me? Why? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just the why is he talking to me? What is that reason? Yeah.
And exactly, it's the intent.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot in terms of an unintegrated and immature element to particular characteristics of masculinity that lend to these types of creepy and abhorrent behavior in men, which need to be addressed individually, but also I think a community element to men's work is a really big piece of that.
For sure.
And being able to say, look, another piece, I'm going to reference the internet 100 times in this video, but we're on the internet, so this is good.
Yes.
Hello, internet
It's
world.
like the internet is
This is the thing.
it's a thing.
Oh my god. So there was a piece that was like, we see all these anti-rape rallies and these consent positive rallies, these sex education rallies. It says no means no.
Oh my god.
And I don't think that what I was reading in this post really resonated, where it said, like, that's not the issue. It's not that they don't understand that no means no. A rapist understands the word no, just like a toddler understands the word no, but they will still do otherwise. And that's the piece, that they don't care. So how is it beyond severe psychological disorders like sociopathy and psychopathy, some psychopathness, whatever, where we can begin to create a level of empathy in men in an integrated sense for recognizing that, yeah, okay, it's okay to find a woman sexually attractive. It's okay to want to engage with them sexually or romantically or whatever. It's okay to want that. What's not okay is to force your desires on anyone, period. Like, and we know that as integrated human beings
Yeah.
in the world,
Yeah.
but obviously some people don't. So one of the pieces that has been integral for my growth in integrating this, and I've offered to men in the past in my work, has been the question, as a man, what is it like to be a woman? And sitting with that and asking and having the wherewithal to listen to the responses and to say, okay, so I know that it's terrifying for you to walk alone at night on 11th Avenue when there's no one else around and there's a single dude there. Okay, now if I'm that single dude, what can I do in that scenario? It seems off the table to say, pardon me, miss, I'm sorry, I'm not a weirdo. Like, yeah, okay, you sound like a weirdo now. Like, great. So it's going, out of your way 3-4 blocks to walk in a different direction so that you're not tailing some woman just because you're both going to the same bus stop. Yeah. It's walking with friends and talking loud enough about something that's not threatening.
Yeah.
Like,
Hey, that club was really great.
I love cartoons. Like,
Yeah.
you ever wonder how
Yeah.
cotton candy is made? Like, something that is, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And I think that that's why these conversations are so important, because there's this large gray area when it comes to how we can do something without breaching one of those boundaries that are already very threatening. There's one more thing I wanted to...
Yeah, can I touch on that one?
Yeah.
So the crossing the street is certainly something I've done as a woman, right? So it's like, oh, I'm walking, in a darkened place or like a darker place, and there's somebody coming towards me. I don't know if they're a man or a woman. If they're a man, I am certainly crossing the street and walking on the other side of the block. And it just occurred to me, like you just said, that you might consider walking a different route so that you're not directly following somebody, because for sure that could I know it would probably freak my nervous system out if somebody was following me, even if they're not following me, even if they're just walking the same direction, but the fear, the fight or flight kicks in because it's already on high alert because it's nighttime. And so just like taking in this moment to imagine what it might feel like to see that you were walking towards a man late at night and to see him cross the street and move on the other side so that you could sort of like continue where you were. And just like the feeling of that for me is like, oh, like, thank you, like, thank you. Because I'm thinking about it, you're probably, I didn't recognize that men were necessarily being like, how do I not make them feel uncomfortable? How do I not, put fear into another human being. Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's a short-term solution.
Yeah,
You know,
obviously
because I
it's a
think
Band-Aid.
it's a Band-Aid for the larger problem. But that's a big piece, and a lot of my brothers walk in this world feeling like they're seen as threats and people who would do nothing but good.
Yeah.
In my eyes, and that's something else that we can work through. But the second piece I wanted to touch on was the man-to-man elements of toxic masculinity and what that looks like in its various forms. In the broadest scale, things like shaming when it comes to behaviors, when it comes to personality traits. So there's a lot that is in I would say an unintegrated element of masculinity seem judged to be less than manly, and those are the stereotypically feminine things, which when I do this because it's absurd to characterize any particular behavior that doesn't have to do exclusively with your genitalia as having to do with one gender or another. Because
we all hold both within us to varying degrees, right?
Well, yeah, and if I don't need my penis to do it, it's not a man's activity. Like, for God's sake, like there are women more capable at doing typical manly things like fixing a car and fixing a house than I am. And I might be a better cook and a better cleaner than some women, and they may have no interest in it, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But that piece of it and being able to take out these gender norms, which I think has been a huge topic for a lot of the world now, is saying, what is this heteronormative gender stereotype doing in our relationship and doing in our society right now?
Yeah.
So for me, I know it's like they talk about, we'll come back to like slut shaming and talking about that type of judgment on sexuality. As a man, there are very few things in the general sense that can be done to validate one's masculinity. One is being physically strong, being able to bench press your own body weight, being able to fix things, being able to provide materially, and being able to reach some level of sexual achievement, that is to say, to get lovers, one, multiple, whatever it is. And really, those four don't leave any room for emotional integration, for any sort of personal fulfillment and personal enrichment in and of themselves. I'm not to say that people can't find these things through those activities, but if those are seen to be your only outlets and your only avenues for a valid sense of masculinity in yourself, my God, no wonder people are going crazy. I can't, I know in myself, I don't operate on this, obviously we're having a conversation about it, but I have been the one who went and bought the fast car and got all the mods for it, and would go and change his own oil and feel all sure of himself. As Elena said at the beginning of the video, I used to be a bro, thank you very much.
Sorry.
It's okay, I suffered from toxic masculinity, and I see that the essence of the interrelating and the piece of that toxicity that comes through the interrelating is the projection of those beliefs onto other men from men. So if I encounter a man who sees me wearing, a deep V and tight pants and doing something like dancing or yoga or something, and they're like, oh my God, you're a sissy. And it's like, well, what does that even mean? Are you questioning my physical strength? Are you questioning my emotional strength? What about this is a problem for you? Because the bigger question, which we're not going to be able to address here, is what makes a man. And that's not something I'm going to touch on here, but if you're interested, you can very well leave a comment and we can get in contact and we can talk about that, because I do offer sessions here in Calgary for men as well as one-on-one stuff, but shameless plug. Anyways, so a big piece of being able to overcome those things is a deep level of personal strength. I recognize that that's not easy for everybody to have moving in this world, but if you have an opportunity to address someone who is projecting these types of toxic masculinity, the behaviors that are going to keep men small, keep men ashamed, or keep men in a position of relating to women that is unhealthy, it's your responsibility as a man, who I'm speaking to now, and as women, which is a different element, to say something. And to say, look, if you, not even projecting your own beliefs, but asking questions, because there is maybe is stereotypical, but there's often, well, the men are always trying to solve problems. You know, we've heard this one before, right? And if a man is trying to solve a problem, and if that's their standard, you know, the default masculinity as presented in society is the problem solver and the provider, well, give them a problem to solve and let that be their perspective on the world by asking questions. They go, okay, if you believe that I'm not a man because I haven't, you know, laid with this many women, what about that activity equates to masculinity? And have them and open a dialogue. Well, really, and you know, it might not be your question first that does that, but if you're one of 10 people who asks that question to them, eventually people start to go, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait.
What is it about this that I'm associating? Is it the fact that there is a level of prowess, that it's associated with power, it's associated with dominance? Like, what are we associating with the masculine expression of sexuality that is inseparable from now our gender norms, and how is that impacting? I can tell you it's having a big impact for sure.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, there's so much. I want to have you back on to do What is a Man?
What is a man?
My gosh.
Oh God.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah.
Let's dive into
Are
that.
you a man? You've done it. Congratulations. There's the bar.
Right.
If you're a man, you're good enough as you are right now.
Straight up.
You don't need to do anything else.
And if you're a woman, you are a woman. Straight up. You have done that. And if you've changed or switched or are in between, you are a human.
Yes.
And you are enough.
And equal in every way.
Yeah. In all of these ways. And yeah. I just want to sit in that for a minute because I got goosebumps all over.
We love you.
Love you so much.
Wherever you're at.
Yeah. All the peoples, all the animals, all the plants. So much love. So much love. Yeah. One of the things that you spoke about was this piece of a responsibility to speak up. Yeah. And so that looks like a couple of different things, and I want to give some examples. So I had spoken earlier of, my like girlfriend's in maybe a dangerous situation, or maybe not a dangerous situation, but I'm feeling uncomfortable in that, right? And so then there's this responsibility to speak up. When I see men treating each other poorly, right, or uncomfortable in relation to each other, it's like, we can speak up. You've spoken to me about the need for physical contact, the need for like that cuddle space, which is something that has been completely deprived from men after the age of 3 or 4 for most men. And it's one of the reasons that men fall in love so easily is because they're actually oxytocin deprived. And so as soon as it's like, she's touching me, and the whole oxytocin system goes like crazy, right? So when we see, when I see men being uncomfortable around touch and I feel comfortable and they feel comfortable, to me, it's like, for sure, like platonic touch is wonderful. It's a great way to build connection between two people, and it doesn't need to move into sexuality. There's a responsibility to speak up and say that, to be able to, as a woman, be able to hold a coherent space for a man, for a partner, to be like, this is my boundary and everything up to there is good. And we might renegotiate that boundary, probably not in the moment, right? So there's that whole piece. Where else might we want to speak up? Can
I get a little touch on that?
Go for it.
There was a podcast I was listening to called Knowledge for Men. It's hosted by Andrew Farabee. If anyone's interested, definitely go check it out. And there was someone he had on there that introduced a word that was very, very potent, and it kind of touches on the oxytocin depravity, or being deprived, and that's homosensuality. So that is to say, a platonic and sensual connection between people of the same sex that is not necessarily romantic, not necessarily sexual, but there are, men are deprived of touch. What I loved about walking in India, as an example, is that the men will hold hands.
Yeah.
And there's this brotherly love is freely expressed everywhere that you go.
Yeah.
And here, if you're going to hold hands with a man, are you in a domestic partnership? Are you gay? Canada's very accepting about that. But at the same time, to have that be exclusive, that the only time I can ever show affection to a man is if I'm related to him or if we're sleeping together. And I think that really limits the depth that two men can connect. Yeah. And just like I had a friend over yesterday, and we have now started making hug's a thing, which is fantastic because there's an element of trust when two people come close like that. I mean, I mean, you can hug strangers, but that's another piece of it. And being able to express love for a friend, as a woman, as a man, of the same sex or of a different sex, platonically through touch is one of the pieces that is going to help us as individuals and as a collective integrate an awareness of what proper relating is, what conscious relating is, what yes in the moment is, what no in the moment is, how to hear and receive and respect someone's boundaries without taking it personally, and learning the very valuable tool of renegotiating and conscious communication, which Dolphin Casper is fantastic. If you haven't seen any of his work or done any of his workshops, he is a wizard of conscious communication. Shout out to Dolphin.
Yeah, I'll tag him in the thing after we're done.
Great.
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit on conscious relating, because that's something that you and I have been engaging in during our time living together, and it's something that a lot of people don't necessarily have role models for. What does that look like? What does it look like to actually be in a healthy dynamic between men and women as friends in like romantic partnership? I know that I've definitely had a lack of role models in my life for what that looks like, and the people who do seem to be in good relationships, sometimes all of a sudden you're like, oh no, they're not together anymore, like maybe it wasn't so good. And just touching in that just because a relationship ends doesn't mean that it wasn't good, helpful, and supportive for the time that it was there. Many of my past partners have radically shifted where I was at and where I was capable of relating to men. And so there's a lot of gratitude for that, even if those relationships don't last a lifetime. Which is like a lifetime of my personality. It's like this.
It lasted their lifetime. The lifetime of the relationship.
It lasted the lifetime of the relationship. And there's a wisdom in being able to let go of relationships when they're no longer helpful. There's a wisdom in being able to say, I have higher standards now, so this is going to shift. There's a wisdom in saying, in offering that space also for the person to rise and to move into those, right? I spoke with a woman a couple of weeks ago who is, her children are grown, and she is in this space of transitioning, considering whether her marriage is still a thing that she wants to be a part of or not, because they've spent the last 15 years or so just juggling the daily, everyday life of having 2 to 3 children. Can't remember how many she had, but having children and being in this space of, it's a lot to just manage everyday life. And now there's this piece of what is the highest purpose? What is the highest purpose of that relationship? What is the goal that she has for her life? What does the next phase of that life look like? And I know for myself and a lot of the women that I speak to who are struggling in this, in relating with men or relating with the masculine in intimate partnership, so in like committed relationship or polyamorous relationship, as women, we have that space holding, right? That like warm womb space that welcomes in the relationship. And the invitation is such a crucial part of that. The inviting into is such a crucial part of that, obviously in physical intimacy, but also in the dynamic of relationship. And there's this piece where if she's not clear what it is that she wants, how could he possibly show up to that? How could he possibly be of service or be in, we're talking about like gender stereotypes here, but the positive ones, the ones that are helpful when they can be brought into a really good dynamic within the masculine and feminine. And so there's this piece of, the invitation from her and the stepping up and moving into, and this woman like really had no idea what was next for her life. And I said, well, if you want to stay in partnership, you need to get clear on what that is. And then he needs to get clear whether he wants to help you and be in that and meet you in that or not. And if he doesn't, then you need to be strong enough on your own to be like, okay, well, thank you. I'm going to hold space for myself and my family and whatever it is that might be next to be able to bring that to fruition. And for sure, there's lots and lots of people out there who are willing to fill those shoes. But what happens so often is that she's not strong enough within herself to be clear on what it is that she wants outside of being in all of those roles, all of those family roles. And then even if she is clear, she's not willing to communicate it to him. And that is such a travesty for relationships. I know that I've lost several relationships because of my own inability to do that, to say, actually, this isn't working and what I'd really like is X, and to be clear in that. So if you're watching this and that resonates, like, please, as a woman, be clear in what you want. As we're stepping into, if we want to take it into a broader piece, like it's impactful within our private relationships, but also as this like feminine rising is happening, it's like there's a lot of focus on the pain that's happened. There's a lot of focus on me too, this bad, this thing happened. And it's beautiful to be able to say it and speak about it, because that in itself is healing. And I feel the next phase of that is to bless you. The next phase of that is to say, what do we want to see from men? What do we want to hold from men? What do we want to experience and offer to men from that? Like, what do we want? What is it that we're holding space for? And for me, it's that moment in Spain where where we can be in that place of mutual appreciation of the beauty of another's body, of another's soul, of another's experience, personality, whatever it is, and to offer that in a beautiful flow, in a beautiful space, and to have people feel safe. And I feel like when we bring that in, when we bring in, this is how we want to be related to, this is how we want to be held, this is how we want to be supported, this is how we want to be co-creating with you, that brings a lot of power to then like call the masculine. And I do feel like we need to hold the masculine in a lot of ways, because as women have sort of come together and been like, this is kind of fucked up, what's going on in our culture right now, we need to create something different. There's a lot of like, women are creating something different, which has a lot of masculine energy in it, just saying, of protection, of keeping us safe. And it's like, I feel like the women are bringing the masculine and feminine into balance within themselves. And I feel like the next step is to bring that coherent container of, we've got this, we understand what we want within ourselves, we understand what that balance is within ourselves, and then opening that up and saying, okay, like awakening masculine, like come closer, show us what is possible in terms of relating, show us what's possible in terms of how we can be together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the language is really important too, and you sort of shifted near the end of your piece there, which I think is really important, where it's less about calling men to rise and more about calling the masculine to rise. Because I've seen a lot of non-binary folks who embody either the masculine in its divine essence or the feminine to either degree or both in a very, very powerful way. Something that you mentioned when you're talking about the story about your friend, I think that there's 3 pieces to that, which is the highest calling of each individual for their lives and for their purpose in that moment, as well as the highest purpose for the relationship. And it's an interesting and sometimes not a very easy point to recognize sometimes, that the highest purpose of your relationship is not in alignment with your highest purpose. And being able to say, okay, well, I can, as soon as you see that, you have to make the choice whether or not you're going to start to take steps to either change the dynamic so that it aligns with the personal mission, your personal mission, so long as it's not exclusive and cutting out your partner, obviously. But being able to speak what you need and being able to say, like, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm offering, this is what I'm called to do, and I would love to have our relating support that. It would be valuable to me, and I would love it and cherish it and put more of my walls down, knowing that this very close, intimate relationship that I'm sharing is able to support my own personal mission, and vice versa, and show up for the other person. What a beautiful ideal that is, and I think that there are some people who embody that to this day. But I think that that's something we can all aim for sure. In terms of...
And that doesn't have to be a romantic partnership.
No.
It doesn't have to be a romantic partnership at all. Like, Tanner and I have had so many great moments of, I understand that his purpose is to be a men's coach in this world, and it's like, how can I support that, right? And you've helped me so much in terms of learning how to relate healthily with the masculine and with men. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For sure. And another piece you were talking on with the rise of women and that invitation. and how it's coming to balance. It's like we touched on earlier, the question of like, what's it like to be a woman, and asking yourself that question as a man. And something that you had brought up sort of is not realizing that there's another element for men for toxic masculinity, and seeing what's it like to be a man in this scenario. And by no means does asking either of these questions invalidate the position of the other and the experience of the other. By and quite differently, it actually deepens and really, I think, breeds respect for the other position, to say, look, I know what it's like to be me and to be a man in romantic relationships in this world as whatever I am. When I start to take these pieces and these wisdoms from everybody else, well, now I can recognize behaviors, I can recognize words in every single relationship that I have with women or men that are reflective in the dynamics of the true polar forms of masculine and feminine, and say, where am I not showing up? And how is that creating tension in this? Because I can't take responsibility, and I don't take responsibility for anybody else's behavior other than my own. So if I'm not showing up in my fullest, that's always going to be reflected in my intimate relationships, in business relationships, and anything that I have. And maybe when we do come back on and we have that, what is it to be a man, we can talk about the different characteristics of an integrated and divine sense of masculinity. Because I think that being able to put it into words and have some sort of schema or archetypal structure for people to work with and reflect on, both men and women, is going to serve very deeply, to be able to say, look, if we know that there's, just as an example, major archetypes for the masculine psyche, you've got the warrior, I'm sure you've heard of, you've got the king, you've got the father, you've got the lover, the priest, things like this. Well, some people are going to be able to walk in that space, in one of those 5 spaces, or 3 of those, or 5 of those spaces, to a deeper degree than others. And if you have someone showing up in your life who's continually showing up as a lover, where you need them to be a father, or you need them to be a warrior for you or for themselves, how can you then, as a woman with the archetypes, I'm sure, I know you read Women Who Runs with Wolves, and there's other literature out there talking about the archetypes of the divine feminine, to say, where is the mirror image of this? If I'm not receiving what I need, am I also creating a space, as a woman or as a man, for that to come in a way that I'm not looking for? And always being able to turn that back into an awareness of self and an awareness of the environment that we have in reflection to ourselves, and how that plays out in our environment in a macro scale.
And that, I mean, when you said that piece, it was like, oh gosh, I've had so many lovers show up in my life, and what I really wanted was, these other, like, probably more of the king energy. And it wasn't until I raised my standards for what I was going to accept in close relationship, it wasn't until I raised my standards of what is allowed to show up in this space in relation with me, and what is it really obvious that I'm going to say no to. It's like, nope, that doesn't work. Nope, that doesn't work. Nope. Like, people were still rocking around talking about conspiracy theories. Like, I love you, but if that's what you're talking about, like, there's more to grow. There's more. Oh my gosh, I saw Jim Carrey do this the other day. He's like, it's the all-seeing tongue of the Illuminati. Made me laugh so hard.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. It was so funny. Yeah. It was so funny.
So no more conspiracy theories in your life?
No more. Well, it's just, if we're focusing on the problems, we're not creating the solution. That's how I see it. So if we're focusing on, like, this is what's not working, and if we spend 90% of our time in that, like, it's okay to realize that there are problems in the world, problems in your life, problems in how you're relating with other people. If you don't recognize that there are problems, it's very hard to change them. I spent way too many years in that, for sure, being like, oh, there's no problems here, everything's fine. Be like, but I'm super depressed and super grumpy and super upset with my partners, and the house is on fire. So we have when we raise our standards, when we move into this new space of, like, the people, I meet a lot of people in the consciousness world who say, oh, I'm the only one, there's not that many people like me around me, it's so challenging, da da da. It's like, sorry. Yeah.
We're all here.
Yeah. And like 1 million children in Thailand meditating. I saw that as a thing on Unify. And I was like, that's not the first time I've seen that either. It was maybe 500,000 children last time. I don't remember. But it's like, okay, so we've got 1 million children in Thailand. And we've got all the people who are supporting that. So then let's call it like 1.5 million peoples. Then we got, right? So the concept, and we're sort of like off topic from masculinity, femininity in this moment, but it's important to me because I hear this so often from people all over the world of there aren't that many conscious people. I'm the only one. And I totally recognize that many of us grew up in a households where we were the black sheep. I totally recognize that many of us grew up in families where, I just said that.
Where we were the black sheep.
Thanks, Tanner. Many of us grew up in families where
We were the black sheep?
we were the black sheep. And that does create a sense of isolation and a sense of like, "Ugh, what do I do?" But if you're still focused on that, if you're sitting at home being like, there aren't that many conscious people, it's like, go check out the internet, and then go check out what's happening live in your community on the internet. I did an experiment from Christmas to March. I pulled in over 1,000 events just in Calgary within the conscious community. 1,000 events. That's 10 events a day. There's something for you out there. And if this event, if drumming circle doesn't work for you, go to the singing bowl circle. And if the singing bowl circle doesn't work for you, go to the Reiki circle. And if the Reiki circle doesn't work for you,
Come to the men's circle.
go to the men's circle. If the men's circle is awesome and amazing, but maybe it's not your thing, then go find what is your thing and find who those people are. And, there is this fear of interrelating with people. It's not just between men and women. There's a fear of, if I approach this person, even if they're of the same gender, what if they reject me? A lot of people walk around that. And that stops people from feeling like they're inclusive and in that community more than anything else that I've seen.
That's a really powerful one.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of something very similar to that within the men's community when it comes to relating to people that they're attracted to. It's like, well, like, what if I'm rejected? What if I'm rejected? Well, when we start to sit with ourselves and we start to truly evaluate where we're at, and this is again a very deep topic, but reflecting on self-worth and being able to see that who we are now is valuable, is valid, and has something to offer to the world, when we're able to integrate that in a very deep sense within ourselves, it no longer becomes, I hope they like me, it's, I hope I like them.
Yeah.
I hope I find something in common with
Yeah.
them. Not to say that we're walking around on some sort of high horse, but not everybody's going to be your best friend. That's totally okay. Yeah. But being able to move in the world and see it as, who can I include? Who do I get to meet today? Instead of trying to fit the mold that we project onto the world and that's projected onto us as men, as women, as non-binary folk. Whatever that mold is that you've been thrown at and squished into, we can say, well, look, the only mold you're ever going to fit is the mold of who you are and who you're going to become. Now, we don't want you to cut your arm off or curtail your passions to try and fit some...
That's where depression happens.
And anxiety and suicide and dysphoria and all sorts of terrible things. It's just not a good idea. So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is love yourself.
Yeah.
And how to do that is to be honest and to take time to recognize where your strengths are and to be alone for a period of time every day.
Yeah, for sure. The sitting with yourself is super important.
And it seems ironic that being alone is going to help you get over
being alone. Loneliness.
Loneliness, yeah.
But
being alone, actually that makes a lot of sense now that you say it like that. And how that can assist in interacting where we're no longer coming with an agenda. And to bring this all the way back around to conscious relating. A big piece is being transparent about our agendas and what it is that we want from a relationship with a person. And if that's, I want a business partner, or I want a lover, or I want a muse, or I want whatever, being able to know what your agenda is beforehand and being willing to drop that. And also, it's fine to want one, it's fine to find exactly what you're looking for and exactly what you want. Having the willingness and the capability to drop those types of agendas will also open up an opportunity for you to welcome in whatever that person could be for you beyond that agenda. Yeah. And I think that it's the agendas for both men and women carried into romantic relationships that are the crux of a lot of issues. You might be a young woman and say, well, I want a husband and a family. Well, every time that you're going to go and engage, if that's your barometer, you're inevitably either going to find someone who perfectly fits for that, which is hooray, that's great, they want that too, or you're going to try and find someone who is accessible, available, and try and fit them into that mold.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, from my experience, been one of the harshest lessons, is taking full responsibility for the molds that we try and put other people into. And say, look, like, I have my values, I have my beliefs, I believe a man needs to be this way, or I believe a woman needs to be this way, and therefore you, as the person closest to me who's agreed to share part of their life with me, has to be that way.
Yeah.
And that's not love, that's possession.
Yeah, or expecting that relationship to be everything for you, right? There's a huge amount of, because of the nuclear family and the experience of that, we've moved from tribal culture to, husband or wife will provide not only best friend, but also confidant, but also counselor, but also,
Muse.
all of these things. And when we're able to open that up and say, I receive these things from our relationship, and I'm not necessarily receiving X, Y, and Z.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. So I'm going to move and start looking for X, Y, and Z over here. Like, my romantic partner is a man, can never provide woman best friend experience ever. It's like not possible, nor should I ever expect that. So, I need to literally go look for a feminine being to be in that role. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, so much. There was one more thing I wanted to touch on, but I can't remember what it is right now. Expectations in relationships. Oh, yeah. So, just trying to make sure I don't stab myself in the foot with how I say this.
We'll all forgive you no matter what.
Sweet. And me too.
Yes.
Which is the most important part.
Yes.
If I could change anything about some of the relationships that I've been in that haven't lasted a lifetime, it would be that I wish I would have been more clear moving into them. This is what I'm wanting. Right? Since I separated from Alex's dad, I have been looking for who is going to be father to my son. Right? And every relationship that I went into, I was looking for that. But I literally never actually said it to the person I was moving into a relationship with. Never. Okay? So then when they don't meet that, when they don't show up to that, and I get angry, it's like, well, it's not their fault for not doing that. It's not my fault for being in that experience, but it is a lack of consciousness within the communication, right? If I could have said, this is what I'm looking for, they could have been like, oh, well, I'm not willing to provide that. But we also could have said, and this is interesting enough that perhaps we'll explore it for some period of time, right? Because just because the relationship isn't till death do us part, which is totally a fabrication, mallards are till death do us part. It's part of their, like the duck.
Ducks.
Ducks.
I like ducks.
Ducks do death to us part.
Swans and penguins too.
Swans and penguins too. Great, thank you. I didn't know that. We are not birds. Clearly, monogamy is not working for most people in the form that it is, and so we're setting ourselves up for unrealistic expectations when we offer that in that way. When we say like, I want this, or we say, you don't say I want this, but you're wanting it anyways. When we're not clear in that communication, it can be really, really challenging for both parties to be in good relationship. And when we say, hey, I don't see you as a life partnership, even though that's what I'm looking for, but this is interesting enough that I might want to explore with you. Let's see what the next 6 months looks like. That creates a much healthier foundation for the exploration of that relationship, and it creates a much healthier foundation for the eventual dissolution of that relationship, which is probably what's going to happen because, when you walk into a relationship being like, this might not work, it's like a 90% chance it's probably not going to work out in the way that you were hoping. Jesse's like, are you saying a guy could never be a girl?
No. I think what you were saying is that there's always going to be some element of interactions that's not going to be able to be fulfilled by a partner. So if you've got, a partner in transition and they're becoming a woman, sure, they can be a woman, but the point was that you're not going to be able to find everything that you need that you would be able to get from different types of relationships in one person.
Yeah.
I think that was the
Yeah.
crux of that. I think the metaphor was really, there's a metaphor here. It's like going to a restaurant and then not telling the waitress or waiter what you want and then getting upset with the food that you get.
Totally.
You're like, I know I wanted food, but this wasn't it. How did you not know?
Yeah, yeah, or like a relationship example would be, I want somebody who doesn't smoke, but I don't check in those first 3 dates as to whether or not they smoke or not, and then I'm horrified 6 months later when I found out they smoke all the time and they've just been like brushing their teeth and cleaning their face really well when we get together, like those kind of things, right? It's like, if you don't ask the questions, if you don't say the thing and do the thing, good luck. Yeah.
Can you ever expect to get what you want?
Yeah.
Sign off here.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap up for today. If you guys want to see Tanner back on here, that could totally happen. It's been great to be here with you guys and to be in this experience, and super love you guys. If you want to check out more about Tanner's offerings for men and his men's group, please just reach out to him personally on Facebook. He'll respond back with as much information as you need, and I highly recommend working with him. He's radically impacted my life, and I'm not even a man. So, hope you guys have a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful day. Did you want to say anything before we sign off?
Thank you.
Yay.
I love you.
I love you.
Carry yourselves with what you want to see in this world and share your truest self with yourself first so that it can be seen and appreciated by others. My name is Tanner Berquist, and I hope you have a beautiful day.
Bye, guys.